Good morning.
Good morning.
This morning, Matt Syndergaard, pilot from Denmark, will have a lecture about paragliding psychology. So the mind asset that it's needed to be a successful pilot. Okay, Matt.
Thank you. So, I'm going to start by just saying a few words about myself, because then you know more about if you should listen or if you should trust what I'm going to say or not. And I think it's important to make your own judgment all the time. Some of the things that I'm going to say are probably going to contradict what Michael and what Aljaž and what Thomas have said. And that doesn't mean that what they said was wrong, or that what I'm saying is wrong. It just means that there's more perspectives than one on all of these things. And it's important that you make a judgment for yourself. Anyway, I started flying paragliders in 1988. So that makes something like 24 years ago now. And since I'm 43 years old, I've been flying for more than half my life. And it has defined my life ever since I started. It's been the thing that has defined me. And that tells you something about how obsessive a personality I have. I started flying competitions in 1994. It was the World Cup series, and it started in Brazil, and that was my first competition outside of the Danish nationals. That was a World Cup in Brazil. And since from 94 until 2001, I was doing all the World Cups all the time and going to the big CIVL competitions. And then in 2001 I got a little bit tired, and I took a break of a few years and did something else with my life. And then I came back around 2003, and I've been doing a lot of competitions again from 2003 until now. And but not so many World Cups anymore, because that's simply too much time that you have to invest if you want to be present at all these World Cups all the time. I have summarized some of all the things that I've learned over those years in this book that I wrote last year, and that was published around Christmas time last year. It's called Flying Rags for Glory. It means something about flying textiles because you think you might win someday or something like that. And it's called The A to Z of paragliding competitions. I think it's the only book about paragliding competitions as the only subject. And the Slovenians among you will even recognize the wing on the front page, because it's Gaspar's old wing. And he sold it to Vermelho in Brazil. And this picture was taken in Brazil by a Brazilian pilot or a photographer who lives there, and he let me use it for the front page. And people usually come up to me and ask, I didn't know that you had a tattoo on your leg. And as you can see, I don't have a tattoo on my leg, because it's not me. Anyway, this book, is going to be used. We have 3 books that we're going to distribute as trophies for this competition, and I think it's up to Primož and Gaspar and Primož to decide who gets the actual books, but there are 3 books that are going to be used as trophies here. Also, I try to make a running commentary on the competition paragliding scene, the worldwide one, on a blog that I have. And if you're interested in finding that one, I've put a bunch of cards up here, and you can see the website on the cards, and I've probably got more if there's not enough. So if you go to that blog, I sort of try to keep the world updated on what's happening. The thing is that I'm in touch with the competition scene, both as a competition pilot, but also as a representative of a manufacturer, because I work for UP Paragliders. And I'm also involved with this new task force set up by the CIVL to try to work out what we're going to do now that there's no open class anymore. And I'm even in contact with several other groups of people who are working on the same, but who for some reason don't want to be working inside of the CIVL, but are trying to influence things from outside of the CIVL. So I'm in touch with a lot of this, and I'm trying to summarize many of those things on the blog so that people who are not maybe in touch with so many people can follow a little bit of what's happening. So that might be interesting. And I also make, on the blog, I also make updates to this book, meaning that when I think of something that I forgot to put into the book, I write it on the blog, and that doesn't cost anything. The book does cost something, and it's available from Cost Country's web shop. Now, before we start with what I actually have prepared for this morning, I would like to make a small addition to what I said the other evening here about keeping the game dynamic and moving on and all of that. I was going to tell you that I know that some of you are going to go too soon. That's a loud coffee maker, that one. I know that some of you are going to go too soon from lift somewhere on a ridge, and then you're going to land, and then you're going to say, but Matt told me to keep moving on. And I also know that you who do that will know when you do it that you're too low, because it's actually possible to feel that with your instincts. Generally, when you're moving along a ridge or when you're moving on a task, you have an instinctive feeling of how much is enough, and definitely an instinctive feeling of how much is not enough. And if you have that instinctive feeling of it's not enough, don't go just because I said keep moving. And especially, don't come to me afterwards and say, but you said keep moving. Sorry. I have a son who's 14 months old. He's about this big. And he goes in daycare every day with 28 other children. And these 28 other children are like plague dogs. They get all illnesses on the planet. And he gets those illnesses and he brings them home to me. And that's why I'm coughing like a crazy person right now. Sorry about that. So anyway, when you're up there and you're listening and you're flying and you're thinking about, should I keep pushing on just like Mats told me now, or should I stay here and turn a little bit more? Just pretend I didn't say it. Look at what's ahead of you. Does it look like you're high enough to get to the next reliable lift source? If yes, go. If no, stay. It's not hard. Anyway. When you listen to me and when you read the stuff that I write, either on the blog or in the book or something like that, it's important to realize that there are two basic parameters. One is that eventually we actually do want to win. The purpose of the whole exercise is that we want to learn how to become good enough that we can win competitions. That doesn't mean that we show up at the first competition and we want to win it, because that's not a realistic goal to have. Michael Siegel is a supremely talented young man, but even he didn't turn up at the first competition he flew and won it. It's just not the way it happens. So there is a learning curve. Some people have a very steep learning curve. I have a somewhat less steep learning curve. It's taken me 20 years. And I'm still not winning every time. And you cannot expect to be winning every time. But the point I'm trying to make is we do want to win. That is the point of showing up to the competition. It's also something about respecting the competition environment. Now some people, they turn up at competitions saying, yeah, they have the retrieves organized and I can bomb out wherever I want and I get picked up by a bus. And in a way, I think it's okay. It's not that it's a wrong approach, but it somehow degrades the whole competition environment a little bit. I'm not sure how to explain that, but if we have a competition, then some people are very serious about it, And if you then say, yeah, I'm just here for the retrieves, I'm not so happy about that. Anyway, so the purpose over time is that we want to learn how to win. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind when you listen to what I say. The next thing I'm going to say is that we all want to come home alive. Now, paragliding is potentially quite dangerous, and you could get hurt doing it. So it's a very noble purpose to have in the back of your mind that you actually want to come home in one piece and you want to come home alive. So those are the two basic parameters that everything that I write or say should be seen in the light of. I have a question for you here. When you sit here among your friends here or your competitors, there's a good exercise is that you look around and you try to think, who's my most dangerous opponent here in this game? Has anyone got any idea who that might be? Very good, Primus. You need a mirror to see him, because the most dangerous opponent you have is yourself. From a winning perspective, it's if you come to even if you come to launch just for a free flight, and you think, oh, I haven't flown for 4 months, I'm really rusty, then you're already mentally priming your mind not to function optimally. It's not a good thing to do negative priming. It's the same thing you say, oh, I'm happy if I just get to goal once in this competition. Then you already primed your mind to actually not be doing its best in the competition. I'm not saying you turn up at competitions and you say, I'm going to win. Because clearly, if you're a beginner and you haven't flown competitions before, then that's not going to happen. And priming your mind for something that is totally out of reach is also not constructive. But you must prime your mind to do the very best you possibly can. And that includes priming your mind to be safe. Meaning that if you, like many pilots struggle with what I call unhealthy imagination levels. They sit in the air and everything's actually going okay, but then they spot that little carabiner on the right and they go, ooh, that looks awfully small. Does any one of you have that you sometimes suddenly start thinking, oh, I wonder if the harness is going to be strong enough? Or I wonder if the line, I remember there was a knot on the line and maybe it's been damaged there, and maybe it's going to break, and maybe all the other lines are going to break. And then you get really, really tense and you can't perform well. I think it happens quite often. Also, for some pilots, they might be thermaling in a spot with a lot of rocks below, and it's turbulent, and they look down and they see the rocks, and then immediately a film inside of their head starts playing with them having a big collapse and a spiral dive and hitting the rocks and be splattered all over the rocks. I think a lot of pilots actually have that sort of imaginations, and it doesn't work. Well, it works, that's the problem. It really works. It primes the mind to think that it's going to happen just now, and that increases the probability of it actually happening. So, I'm going to propose something to you here, and that is, if you look around, you have most paraglider pilots are like myself. We like to call ourselves middle-aged, but we're actually a little bit older than middle-aged. But there's also a bunch of younger pilots. And these younger pilots, they're much more gung-ho. They do crazy stuff, and they get away with it. Because they think that it's impossible that they could get hurt. It is a young person's mentality, you know that. I can't die, because I'm too young. It's not possible. But the fact of the matter is, it's very rare for them actually to get hurt because they don't believe in it. Whereas the other, the careful pilot, the very sensible pilot, the older pilot like myself, we start thinking, hey, you're not immortal. You start realizing because your teeth are hurting, your back is hurting, and you start realizing, yeah, actually I'm going to die one day, and maybe it's today. And that is not a good attitude to this sport. Because if you think it, the mind thinks, maybe that's the way it is. And I can't explain to you why this is, but I know for a fact that the more the mind is focused around something, the more it's likely to happen. It's something that you will recognize if you think of the training slope when you just started paragliding. Where I was, it was a big field down below with a tree in the middle, and the instructor said, don't hit the tree. And
You focused on the tree.
people focus on the tree, they don't hear the don't hit, they just hear the tree. Or the mind just hears the tree. And then they go out and then they're flying and it's tree, bang, into the tree. And it's the same sort of mentality that I'm trying to explain to you here that you must avoid in our sport here. And it happens for everybody. I think it even happens for Idris, although he's young and thinks he cannot die. But it probably does happen to him sometimes. And the trick is you have these thoughts, you sit there and you think, I wonder if these carabiners are going to hold. And you say, stop that, you stupid jerk. You just take that thought, mentally open a drawer, put the thought in the drawer, close the drawer, get on with the flight. And this is a type of visualization technique that has been used for many years by sports people all over the world. This idea that you put unwanted thoughts into drawers and close the drawers. So you imagine taking that thought and just filing it away, it's gone, I don't have to bother with it anymore. And then you start thinking of something more constructive, like, well, you could be thinking of how you're going to cross the next gap. How high do I need to be to cross the next valley and to get to the other side with enough altitude? And that's a constructive thought, and it occupies the mind so that it's not spending time on all this bullshit that it likes to disturb you with. Once you get more experienced, then these little thoughts about how much altitude do I need and is there going to be a thermal there and all of that, that becomes instinct, that becomes intuitive. And it's important to let it become intuitive, because I think the mind is too small to deal with all those things that you need to deal with in a flight. The conscious mind is just not capable of processing all the information you need. So when you ask a pilot like Podobnik, why did you leave with such low altitude for the final glide? He may try to rationalize afterwards and say, yeah, because I thought that there was going to be some lift there and there and there. But he's bullshitting you, because he doesn't know when he leaves on that final glide exactly why he does it. He just knows that it feels right. And he has, and that's really enough. He doesn't need to know why, because the point of the exercise is that his subconscious mind has already noticed the bird that's turning over there, it's seen the cloud that's developing up there, it's seen the angle of the slope that he's going to just skim as he comes to the last turn point, and it's seen the sun, and it's seen that there's no cloud coming in. It's seen all these things plus 1,000 more things, and it's put all these things together into a decision that means, okay, I've got enough altitude to make it to go now. And that's the instinctive mindset of the winning paraglider competition pilot. The one who first has to analyze every single of these many aspects. He'll be turning in the last thermal until the task is closed, because the deadline is over. And so how do you reach that level of experience Well, that's why there's a learning curve in competition. That's why you're not going to win the first competition you show up at, even if you've read the book first. It doesn't do it. Because you need to accumulate all these experiences and just put it all on top of each other and stacking it, and eventually all these decisions that you're making along the way become instinctive, and you just do it, just keep doing it, moving through the sky fast. And the funny thing, somebody asked me the other night, so the fast gaggle, the lead gaggle, even though they don't have anyone in front of them, they're still moving faster than the ones who have people in front of them. That's almost always true. The exception is when there's one of the really good pilot who has somehow gotten low behind, and then he's got this whole field of good pilots up in front of him showing what the sky is doing. This guy can really move, especially if he's got a good wing. It's something Thomas is sleeping because he's from Czech, but it's something he told me once. He said, you can always reel in the competition from behind, because you've got all these people out in front showing you what's happening. And but if you don't have the experience that Thomas has, plus the prototype that he has access to, then you can't do it, because the front gaggle, even with nobody in front of them, are still moving faster than you, because they just analyze what's happening in front of them faster than the rest of us do. So, sorry. I think when we're talking about this priming idea, just to give a little bit more credit to it, I think you all know, maybe you have a mother at home who spends her evening on Wikipedia searching all the illnesses that she might have, and then the next morning she's on the phone to the doctor saying, I think I have. And then she probably spends more time being sick or ill than the rest of us. The people who think that they're never going to get ill won't get ill. I'm not a super example right now, but I do try, and I think you can all think of examples of this negative priming happening. I read a story once about a person whose life was, he was a salesperson and he was driving on the roads all the time, and he thought, one day this is going to catch up with me, because traffic is dangerous and I'm spending so many hours in traffic, so one day it's going to catch up with me. And of course it did. I'm not saying that if you never think about an accident, then you won't have an accident. I'm just trying to turn your heads around to the fact that if you don't think you will have an accident, then I actually think there's less of a probability of you having an accident. Anyway. It's a little bit pseudoscience. It's not proper science, because it's not something that you can prove. But medicine does have some of it where they give you placebo instead of real pills, and generally the reference group with the placebo medicine gets well more or less as fast as the ones who get the real medicine. And that just tells you something about the power of letting your mind believe in something. I think it has something to do with energy. I'm just going to propose a possible explanation here. It has something to do with energy and how do you divert that energy. Think of Kriegel Maurer in this year's X-Alps. So we have Kriegel here. He's a farm boy from a valley somewhere in Switzerland, and he thinks that he has a God-given right to win. Now that is a fantastic attitude for a sports person to have. It's the best attitude you can possibly have. Put on top of that, he's got 10,000 people watching him on the internet thinking he's going to win. That is like a wave of goodwill that he's sitting on top of. surfing, and he can't lose. It's not possible, because there's so much positive energy pushing him along that he, in the end, he's got 48 hours lead on number 2, and then he can sit back and relax for 24 hours because he's so far ahead that it doesn't matter anymore. There's more to it, but I think that you get the idea that this immense amount of positive vibration or energy or whatever you choose to call it, it is going to make a difference. Now the practical implications of this is for example, you can use it when you feel fear. I think most of us have felt fear in the air. There's many good reasons for feeling fear when you're flying paragliders. But funny enough, I think most of the fears we have when we're flying paragliders are not particularly rational. Again, it's something like, is the carabiner strong enough? Are the lines strong enough? Is the glider suddenly going to rip because of something? It's some very, very strange things that people can tell themselves might happen when they're flying in the air. And it's probably natural, because actually sitting 2,400 meters above a rocky slope is not a natural situation for a human being. It's completely out of what evolution has prepared us for. So it's probably natural to have these fears, but they're not rational, because gliders are tested to 8 Gs, and everything in the whole equation is so strong that it's ridiculous. So you don't need to have these fears, and you take them and you put them away again. Now, some of the fears that you might have may be rational. You could be, as I said before, thermaling above a rocky mountainside, and you could potentially have a collapse there, and you might not be able to control it, and you could have a spiral dive and you could hit that rocky slope. It does happen. We know that it does happen. But even that thought must be filed away, put away, because it incapacitates your reactions, and you need your best reactions when you're flying paragliders. So all these fears that you have, although they may even be rational, they have to be put away, because you cannot be performing if you're scared. And you know how it is. You're sitting in your harness, and the stomach muscles get more and more tense, and you sit up more and more, and you become more and more tense, and every movement becomes one of these, and it's not very efficient. Everybody knows it's not very efficient. So you start using your breathing techniques instead. You take deep breaths into your diaphragm like this, deep breaths, and lean back again in the harness. As soon as your body starts to relax, the mind goes, oh, danger's over. That's okay then. The mind responds to what the body does, and then as the body is relaxing, the mind relaxes too, and you're back to performing much better again, because you need soft, fluid movements to keep a paraglider flying in crazy air. And you know, something like 99.9% of all collapses can be avoided if you're just moving right with the wing. I think on average in the last 10 years I've had one collapse every 2 years. Like the collapse is defined as an event where the wing goes, and when it comes back out again I'm flying in another direction. That's a collapse. Like wingtips and things is not a collapse in this definition. But proper events where I'm going in another direction when it's all open again. One every 2 years. That means, because I fly quite a few hours in competition, that means that it's one collapse per maybe 250 hours or something like that. It's not a lot. Now, Remus is going to argue that that's because I don't push enough speed bar. And he's right. I don't push super much speed bar because I'm an old man and I have little children and I'm scared and all of that shit. But I can still sometimes manage to win competitions. So it's actually possible to win competitions even though you're not on 100% speed bar with your eyes closed all the time. And that's the kind of mentality I would like to pass over to you. It's often said that if you want to be successful in competitions, then you have to be very crazy and very stupid. But it's not entirely true. You have to be prepared to fly basically anywhere in the sky. But for me, with my statistics, maybe one collapse per 200 or 300 hours or something like that, that's okay. Because I know that I can go into the most crazy holes and still keep the wing flying. Okay, so sometimes it's looking quite funny and it's moving around a lot and all of that. But it's staying open and I'm still controlling which way we're going. So it is possible, even without actually being flat out on the speed bar all the time. Now, one of the mistakes, this is not about the head so much, but I just thought I would add it. One of the mistakes that beginners do with controlling their wing in turbulent conditions is they think that you can put too much input in through the brakes. What I like to make an analogy to Danish police work. If you're a police officer in Denmark, then you're taught that you must always react with the least possible sufficient force to keep a situation under control. Now their point of that is that if you come charging in every time that there's a bar situation with the guns drawn out and shooting and shouting, then situations escalate. So they try to come in always with their hands on their backs and then only escalates the situation as the situation actually escalates. In paragliding it's the same. We must use the least possible sufficient force. And that means that if the wing is diving in front of us, we must keep braking it until it stops diving in front of us. And on a competition paraglider, even though generally your brake range in still air may be only 40 or 50 centimeters, you can still be in a situation where with one rep you're down here. And it's not stalling, because it's diving so hard that it's not able to stall at the moment. And the point I'm trying to make is, as long as it's still trying to move forward, you're still pulling it deeper. And it doesn't matter how deep you go, as long as you're just keeping it there. And that's a mistake that a lot of pilots in the beginning are doing. They're a little bit worried to accidentally stall, and then they don't use the brake lines enough. So the wing is allowed to dive too far and then it will collapse. And the funny thing about this, what I'm saying now is that it doesn't have to be on both sides. It can be on just one side. So if you're in really savage air and the wing is moving around a lot like this and it's trying to go in front of you, you may find yourself moving in the full range of what your arms can do. But it's okay, because as long as the wing is still flying, it doesn't matter. The only thing that you can't, of course, do is just pull the hands down there and just leave them there, because then you will have a cascade situation where it will get out of control probably. But the least possible sufficient use of force is a good thing to have it at the back of your mind. Just keep the wing above your head at all costs, no matter how much you need to work. Now, back to this head thing. Please stop me if you have questions along the way. I can talk and talk. We've been speaking about this priming and how important it is to have the right energy and the right input before you go to the competition. So, who is going to win any given competition? Following the arguments that I've been trying to make here. Well, it's the one who thinks he's going to win. And that is what made this year's X-Alps a little bit less interesting than it could have been, because Alex Hofer was hurt a few weeks before the competition and he couldn't go. And the funny thing with Alex and Kriegel is that they're both farm boys from Switzerland, and they both think they have a God-given right to win. And the thing about Alex is that if he had been there, then Kriegel wouldn't have been so sure. And that would have taken the top off some of his super energy wave, and then the game would have been more interesting again. Because with all the rest of the competitors, and with Kriegel himself, and 10,000 people on the internet out there, all thinking that Kriegel would win, it wasn't really a very interesting competition. But if Alex had been there, then at least Kriegel would have thought, oh, maybe Alex is going to be hard to beat this year. And that would have taken the top off that extreme wave of self-certainty that he had. And that would have made it more interesting for the rest of us to watch. So in any given competition that you go to, maybe somewhere between 5 and 30 pilots objectively have the skills to win. They could be on similar technical levels. But out of those, let's say it's 30 pilots or 40 pilots, maybe even 80 pilots in a World Cup, out of those, a far smaller proportion actually think that they're going to win. And the winner at the end of the competition is going to be found in that smaller group of people. It's easier in that case to define who doesn't actually win. And what we can do at this level of our competition career is avoiding getting into that situation where we're priming ourselves for definitely not making a good result. Then as we grow better, we can start priming ourselves for making a really good result. But at this stage, it's better to focus on avoiding the negative priming of, oh, but I haven't flown much this year, and I've just got a new wing, and actually things are really difficult at my work at the moment, so my head is not really, all the little excuses that we can give ourselves so that it doesn't hurt so much when we don't perform so well. Don't do it. Just whenever you have these ideas, these you could call them moderators, these thoughts that are actually a little bit negative. They may even sound positive, like, yeah, I'm happy if I make goal once in this competition. But it isn't positive, it's negative. Just make sure you don't have these thoughts. Just do away with them. File them away. And I just mentioned this idea that a group of pilots going to a competition will be thinking that they might win. But then out of those, this is just a personal little idea that I have, the one who is really going to win is the one who is enjoying himself the most. And that is one thing that you can really influence yourself. Now, I've been making the mistake in this competition of not actually liking to fly this serial class wing that I'm flying so much, because I miss my open class wing. And that's all a very valid and true point, but it's not very constructive. It's a very stupid thing to do. Now, Michael Siegel told me the other day, oh, I think this wing is great to fly. And that's, of course, the right attitude to have. It's really important that you're enjoying yourself, that you're having fun, that you're where you want to be at the time, and that you're trying to smile all the time. We talked about this a little bit in the German camp the other day. If you take a group of people, or you take two groups of people in science, that's how you always do in science, and you ask them to sit down and read jokes. And one group, you give the pen, and they have to sit like this and read the joke. They find the joke so much more funny than the other group, because they're already smiling. And it's stupid, but it works. The mind is a fantastic computer, but it is so easy to cheat. And if you can cheat it by just doing a simple thing like this, imagine what you can do by actually smiling. So that means that you turn up at a competition and you're super positive. You're really going to enjoy this. I'm going to love this competition. And all these people that I'm going to spend the week with are great. And it's going to be such a fun time. Then you're already much more likely to make a good result. Does it ring a bell, some of all this stuff? The other thing that I think is important to keep in mind is that flying paragliders, and especially flying paragliders in competition, is potentially dangerous. And if you cannot accept that it's dangerous, if you think deep within yourself, yes, it's dangerous, but if only I don't fly in the lee, and I never let go of my brakes, and you set up all these little rules for yourself, and if only you keep to all these little rules, then you'll be safe. Then you're wrong, because that doesn't mean that you'll be safe. It does mean that you'll increase your chances of being safe, but the whole point of the sky is that you can't see what's happening, and you actually don't know where the lee is. So sometimes it may take you by complete surprise, even though you think that you're really careful and all of that. And if you cannot accept that level of insecurity in the sport, then I think you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. Now, since I've become a father, it's become much more important for me to get home every time. It is really important that I actually get home after every competition. But I don't think about it anymore than I have before, because again, it makes me less able to cope with the conditions that I meet. But the whole thing I'm trying to say is that there is an element of chance, no matter how good or how well prepared you are, and you need to have the mental capacity to deal with that and accept it and say, okay, that's how it is, and just put it away. Doesn't matter. It's not something you're dealing with. And I think that's especially true for competition pilots, because we fly many hours and we do spend a lot of time in the sky. So it's important to have this this mental attitude that, yes, even though I do all the right things, there's still an element of chance. But if you like, that's just the same as getting in your car and driving to work every morning. You don't actually know for sure that some person on a big truck who hasn't slept for 24 hours won't run you over in a traffic junction. So life is full of insecurity, and maybe that's what keeps us ticking a little bit. I haven't got so much more to add to this right now.
I have a question, Matt.
Yes.
What do you tell yourself before you start the race, before you start actually to launch off? What do you tell yourself to find yourself positive?
Well, for me personally, because I'm not the fastest pilot on the speed bar, it's very important that I fly my own course. And that means that I try to tell myself, just go out there, do your own thing, don't look at the others, just fly as fast as you can. And it's very important for me that I don't get locked into lemming mode, just following. I try to always just look at the sky and the terrain and see, can I find a better way than they're going? Because if I can, then I can make up time that way. So my personal priming technique is something about repeating to myself, do your own thing, enjoy it, have fun, that sort of thing. But it's not something that you can see. I'm not mumbling to myself on launch going.
So you're smiling then, huh?
Well, I think I probably don't smile so much, but I'd like to smile more. Maybe I'm smiling inside. It's not so easy to see. The other thing, I need to ask you guys a question. I have to be in Ljubljana at 7 o'clock on Sunday morning. Is somebody driving to Ljubljana on Saturday night? Good.
Think positively, not.
Yeah. Okay, it was worth a try. Some more questions. We still have a few minutes.
I had no question, but I would love to add something to your mindly stuff. Because somebody knows me, I was almost flying cross country, no competitions. And then the most common question was all the times, how did you find thermals when you're flying alone for hundreds of kilometers? And it reminds me very well what you said, to think positive. Because after some flights, people were together with me and they told me, oh, this was a nice flight because there was a landing place and there was a landing place and there. And then I think of me and I say, oh, I didn't know of these landing places. I never see landing places.
Very important.
I just see terminals.
Yeah.
And I say, oh, there it must go up or there or there. And I never saw no landing places. And that's why I'm flying so far, because I just see where it goes up. Perhaps you may take this in
That's a
mind.
fantastic advice. It's very good. And there was a funny little anecdote to that. I think it was Manfred Rohmer on the hang glider. You've heard the name. So he's in a competition and he flies into some crazy valley somewhere. And people afterwards saying, but there was nowhere to land in there. And he says, I didn't go there to land. That's a good point. It doesn't mean that if you're a beginner you should go into crazy valleys all the time. But if you know that there's a thermal there, it's not about landing. It's about going there to get up. And that's a very important little reminder to have. Yeah, I lost it again. Anything more? Yes.
What do you say to yourself after you do that?
I think, you know, a lot of pilots, like Thomas said the other night, you sit down and you analyze after the flight, what did I do well, what didn't I do well, and all of that. I believe in my head that the subconscious has already done that. So there's no point in me sitting down and writing it all down. Maybe it works because you remember it better. But I have this idea, because one of the things I do for work is I do leadership training and management training and team building. And you know, when you're a team building company, you're always very keen to make the customer see how much value you're giving him. Which means that you're always doing these feedback sessions afterwards where you're trying to get him to say exactly the things you want him to say. So what did you learn here and all of that? And it's all bullshit, because if you are good at team building, for example, or management training, then they will have learned it anyway. Although they may not verbalize it and put it on posters that they stick in the lunchroom back at the office, they will have learned it anyway. And the good team building guys, they trust themselves and just say, hey, we don't need all this bullshit because they have learned it. And maybe they don't know that they've learned it, but that doesn't matter because they've learned it. And what separates the really expensive operators in that business from the not quite as expensive is how much time they put into this after summing up of the courses. And I think that is about the same as what we do here, because when you make a mistake somewhere along the course, it registers, and hopefully you don't do it so much next time. So actually, I don't think so much. I think a lot about how to, when I'm writing things, how to explain this to people so that they hopefully see it, or so that it adds something to their own understanding of their own mind. But I don't think a lot about how to consciously improve myself or something like this. I'm counting on experience to actually do that for me. I hope it works. Maybe that's why I have such a shallow learning curve. So, by all means, sit down and write down afterwards what you did, because it will, I'm sure it helps. Verbalizing what you did wrong, yeah, maybe it does, but I don't do it. Maybe I'm too stupid. Okay, so remember today, don't fly through the thermal just because Matt told you. Fly through the thermal because there is a better one further on. That's the thing I want you to remember. Okay.
Matt, thank you very much.
Grab one of these if you want.
I hope all of you listened well to his lecture, because this definitely is the secret of the champions. I mean, the mind asset, but it also goes for the life in general, not only for the sport. So, and it was also already scientifically proven that the mind asset works actually. So, thanks again. About today, now we will leave for Liak, take off. So the procedure is like yesterday. You pick up the lunch packet, the water, and then we move to the vans, and the guys who have own transport go with own transport to Liak. Same as yesterday. Thank you.